You're listening to Tonebender's Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. Sound Ideas works with partners across the creative industries to distribute professional sound libraries, and they're always looking to grow their collection. If you've created your own sound effects library or are currently developing one, Sound Ideas is interested in acquiring high-quality collections from creators, whether it's a focused collection or a wide-ranging release. They offer a trusted platform with global distribution, professional licensing, metadata support, and a team that understands the craft. If you have a sound effects library and are interested in selling it, Sound Ideas would like to hear from you. To get more information, please reach out via email to support@sound-ideas.com. Hello and welcome to Tonebenders. My name is Tim Muirhead and I'm excited to be your host today as we dive into the fantastical world of the hit Netflix series, Wednesday. It's a project that features really fun audio challenges, including creature design, finding comedy in the chaos, and finding the right tone for the unique genre of this program. I got to sit down with the show's supervising sound editor, John Loranger, at his studio in the Toronto area for this in-person talk. Before we rolled for the interview, John was kind enough to play a bunch of scenes from Season 2 in full Atmos so I could hear it exactly as it was intended. Then we got down to talking about his work on the show. It's fitting that we have a featured guest from Toronto on this episode because I want to throw out an invite to all our Toronto-based listeners to a great night coming up on July 6th at the Hot Docs Theatre in Toronto. I've partnered with the Vaughan Film Fest and the Motion Picture Sound Editors to throw a completely free screening of the mega hit film Independence Day for its 30th anniversary. Members of the sound team are coming in as well to do a Q&A with me after the film. Then there will be a post-screening party, and there'll be lots of complimentary bites and refreshments for us all to hang out. Tickets are free. Just head to the link in the episode description in your podcast app and use the code VFFTonebenders to reserve your free seat. Okay, let's get to my talk with John Loranger about his sound work on Wednesday. One of the things about this show is that it's a Tim Burton project. You and I are both of an age where we grew up watching Tim Burton films. His films were in heavy rotation for me. I'm assuming you were probably a similar situation. How have you found working with him?
It's funny, when you think about getting the opportunity to work with someone like Tim, A-list director, iconic filmmaker, visionary, creative, you're sort of giddy with excitement, right? It's like I get to collaborate with this incredible filmmaker. So it's been fantastic. No complaints.
So when you first sat down with him to start thinking about working on this show, getting ideas, what were your first impressions of him?
I got introduced to Tim, I think at the first spotting session for the first episode is when we first met. I think that I was probably a little intimidated. And then once we got into the rhythm of talking about the concept of the show and Tim's direction and what he wanted to do, how he wanted to accomplish it, everything fell right back into a rhythm of like normal, sort of creative collaboration. Obviously, he's very seasoned, very experienced. When you work with someone of that caliber, they know exactly what they're looking for. There's no, well, I'm not sure, or, let me see what you can do. It's like, I want it to sound like this, I want it to sound like that. That's not to say we didn't iterate with him. We did. I think as specific as his visual eye is, his ear is the same.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he picked out details in the mix, the tiniest little things. He would focus on things that were sort of not unimportant to me, but not something specific enough that I would have focused on. And he would say, I want to hear more of that squeaky wheel, right? That's not the right squeaky wheel. I want a different one. So that was really interesting. And, because sometimes when you're working with directors, they're really involved in the sound and sometimes they're not. So, and he seems to, focus on both sound and picture. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned about finding the tone in that first spotting session.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting conversation because this show has a very specific tone because it's scary. It involves zombies. It involves monsters, but it also is aiming at not a young audience, but like amongst my kids who are 10 and 13, it's a big hit show.
Right.
So it can't be like, it's not The Last of Us.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But one of the ways that the show seems to deal with that is by not showing things visually, but letting the sound roll on a couple things. There's a character named Slurp, which I hope we're going to get into. And sometimes when he's eating brains, the camera is not showing him eating brains,
right,
but we're hearing him eating brains.
Yeah.
And so that puts a lot of pressure on you. Was that spoken about from the start, or like how do you take that on?
Yeah, so Slurp was a large focus of the design work in season 2, and it was something that Miles, the showrunner, and I talked about really early on. I knew about Slurp long before they started shooting. And so it was described to me. I saw some early concept drawings. And what's so nice about that is when you have a team that you work with all the time and you collaborate with all the time, you get access maybe a little bit earlier. So it gives you time to like think about these things and what your approach is going to be. And for Miles, his direction on Slurp was that he wanted Slurp to sound like a zombie, but not like a zombie we had ever heard before. So that was a really hard design challenge because I love the zombie genre. So I've listened to all the zombies that people have created over the years. And it kind of gets burned into your sound palette of how am I going to approach this? So I had to undo all that in my head. How am I going to make this zombie original and then scary, but not too scary, and all those things. And then he has a mechanical heart, and all these things had to evolve. And it didn't really become clear to me how the evolution was going to happen until visually it was available. So as the cuts were coming in, I was seeing him reanimating. The approach to that was, from Miles's perspective, was that direction. And then from Tim's perspective, what we started was like a feedback loop where I would send designs of Slurp to Tim. He would review them, give me notes. I would take another pass. And Slurp is made up of probably like 50 tracks of stuff. I wanted to be able to, in the first episode, make him super detailed and cover sort of all the bases from the gore to the bones to different vocals, and then have that available to sort of strip away as he reanimated.
So just to interrupt,
yeah,
for anyone that hasn't seen it, this reanimation takes place over like 6 episodes. It's a slow, long, drawn out,
right,
from zombie, brainless to almost normal human.
Right.
And you have to, with sound, tell that story. Because although visually it's happening, the sound is really what's communicating that.
Yeah, for sure. And that was a big part of the direction from Tim. And so, you know, the approach was to do sort of what I said, create a very layered first version and then sort of strip away the layers that we wanted to hear as he evolved. And it was, I think, for me personally, because Slurp was the part of my design work, the most challenging part of season 2. It just was hard to strike this balance of keeping him a zombie and introducing the human elements over time.
Mm-hmm.
We had the lead actor come in and redo all of his performances. And then we had Loop Group do a version.
Oh, wow.
And then we did a version of creature sounds that I made with my voice. And then library creature sounds. And then all of his movement sounds, like all the gore, layers of gore and shells and bones and all that stuff. So the first version that got approved by Tim went through a long iteration process before we got to Slurp at the end of episode 1.
So this show involves a lot of creature voices, vocal designs.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe talk about your philosophy and how you approach that? Because obviously we're going back to season 1 for this, but Tyler's character has a terrifying roar that is different lengths, different intensities. Like you can't just have a roar generic kind of thing. He's going through all sorts of emotions. And that it's not just that character, it's tons of characters.
Yeah, so my approach to creature design has sort of evolved over the years, but about 10 years ago, I worked on a feature and I was in charge of all the creature design. And during that process, I was given a lot of time to focus on the creatures. And I actually polled a whole bunch of sound designers while I was working on that. Harry Cohen, David Farmer. I emailed them. We had a back and forth. I was looking for ideas. They were really generous with their time. And then there's something that Randy Tom said in an interview at some point about, basing all of his creature design in animal sounds. And obviously that's what most people do. But over the iteration process of basically exhausting all of the technical tools on creature sound design, I end up pulling from organic animal recordings mostly to create my creatures. And mostly because there's something in there that is an emotion that you can pull out. And what's challenging with, the hide is that when it first appeared, we weren't really sure how heavy it was going to be, how big it was going to be, how big its chest was going to be. Like, how do we make it sound huge and carry the weight of the creature? And then you're trying to be original. You're not trying to make your creature sound like all the other creatures. So my sort of philosophy is I will start in an animal-based, and then it will evolve through the design process of pitching down, slowing, speeding up, stretching, whatever, and then adding maybe some human elements, maybe some metal that, resonate and stretch and try to pitch match or whatever I can with the animal so that it doesn't sound separated. Because if the elements sound too separated, then you lose the authenticity of the emotion that you're trying to get the creature to have. And as the creature evolves over season 1 and into season 2, Hide specifically, there's a lot more close-ups and emoting from the Hide in season 2. And so that was a real challenge to expand upon the library that I built in season 1 and add subtle breathing. So I'm sourcing boars and reindeer and that kind of stuff, but also not just looking for breaths, looking for frustrated breaths or whatever from the creature so that you can inject that into the design.
Creature design is really hard for a lot of people. And what you hit the nail on the head is trying to find it to be different than others.
Yeah.
To make it unique to your show.
Right.
So what from what the visuals were on screen triggered your brain to go in directions to make it unique?
When I'm looking at a creature and this kind of applies to everything, we're trying to get it to feel real, right? It's got to feel attached and real to what you're seeing. So I'm taking visual cues from whatever the animation is doing and trying to match that, whether it's, the chest or the eyes or the mouth and how it's moving. And we actually had Tyler in season 1 and in season 2. We had him come in and perform all of his Hide as himself, as the Hide. So I was able to use that sometimes in an envelope follower to match his performance so I would take a creature sound, maybe a bunch of stuff, bounce it down to a stereo, and then, envelope follow what he's doing, just try to get it to feel really natural.
Don't hit the shot collar, it'll kill her. I know you're upset. It's just calming down. I promise I'll get you out of here.
We talked a little bit about the tone earlier.
Yeah.
Something that this show does as part of its overall vibe is it's mixing comedy and horror in a really unique way, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting way. And sound plays a big role in that. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how you find ways to make things funny amongst the carnage.
Yeah, I mean, this is the challenge. This is the difficult thing. A lot of it has to do with the rhythm and the timing of the cut and the dialogue and the performances. And so specifically for comedic performance, we're trying to preserve the original as much as possible, because it's often when we replace the original performance in ADR, it loses whatever it is that happened on the day. It's hard to recapture that comedy, that subtlety that's in the performance is hard to recapture. So first off, we focus on, making sure that we have the actor's performance and we can keep it in the show and not have to replace it for technical reasons. And then, Chris Bacon, the composer, and Michael Ryan, the music editor, the score plays an integral part in how the comedy lands. Like, he's creating space. And so the dance is like, we're trying to emphasize the comedy when we can, make it land, but we're staying out of Chris's way because he's sort of illustrating it all with the score. And there's a lot of score on this show. It's like a combination of all those things. The original performance, what the score is doing, and then what we can do to create space to emphasize those moments. Sometimes it's just about creating the space. Sometimes it's about emphasizing something in the scene that makes it resonate with the audience. If you find yourself smiling during the mix or you're getting chuckles, you realize it's working what you're doing, right? You're trying to get there.
Can you elaborate on you said creating space. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think negative space in sound design is something that's super important. It takes a long time to get an understanding of how to create that space or when that space is necessary and how much actual physical space it is that you need to create in the track. Is it a couple frames that you need, or is it a couple seconds? So for me, it's intuition, really. Like I'm listening, actively listening to what's happening in the scene and all the other things that are happening. And then where does it need a breath? Where does it need a pause for the eardrum to sort of relax? So when the dynamic thing happens next, it hits properly. So it's about timing, really. It's kind of like, I guess, when you think about like a stand-up comedian or something, they always talk about it's the rhythm and the timing of their delivery is what makes it funny, right? So it's sort of that same idea. Like, you need to create the pauses and the spaces to create the comedy.
Before we started recording, you played me the asylum break scene.
Yes.
It's probably a 12-minute scene, maybe, of chaos happening.
Yeah.
There's people breaking out, people changing into creatures, zombies eating people's brains. How do you create those spaces within a scene that's that long?
Well, very carefully. Episode 204, we spent a lot of time obviously editing it, but then on the stage shaping everything together, because, until you're in that scene and you've got the score in and all the dialogue has been premixed and the loop groups in, now you're figuring out where in this rhythm of the dialogue do we create these spaces. And it can be really challenging when it's nonstop action. From a technical perspective, it's hard to just make the dialogue clear with all the sound effects and with the huge score. And then in addition to that, find the space. The lead mixer on the show, Mike Baskerville, and Jamie Sulik, our effects mixer, they do an incredible job of weaving in and out of these things. Sometimes you're frequency reducing stuff to make the space. Sometimes you're just pulling a fader down or pushing a fader, whichever it might be. It's their experience. Jamie and Mike have been mixing for 40 years. They're super experienced. And so Mike has incredible instincts with music and dialogue about how to shape it to make these holes. And then, he and I are fighting about how much sound design is going to get into it and where what we can pull out and what we can leave in. Yeah, that's kind of the dance. I mean, that happens on the stage. And you're reviewing it. I mean, we do a lot of iterations of the mix on this show. Essentially, we're treating the show like a feature.
Yeah.
This is not episodic television. This is basically a 60-minute feature, sometimes a 65-minute, sometimes a 55-minute feature that we're putting out over the course of these 6 months. So we're doing them, every few weeks. We're on the stage mixing for several weeks. So that's kind of how the process evolved. And then in season 2, it became a bit more like structured. We're like, okay, we know how many days we're probably going to need, etc. So that was the process.
So, sorry, I got taken off my original track of questioning there.
Right, I might have done that.
You dove in. No, it was good. I wanted to, you piqued my interest in a couple things. But
Okay.
Let's go back to the idea of comedy versus the horror.
Oh, yeah, right.
Can you think of an example of where sounds did the heavy lifting in a comedy moment?
For me, there's a scene. I should play it for you. It's probably my favorite scene in the show, which is kind of a funny thing to say, but there's a scene in episode 2 where Jenna or Wednesday goes on a driving lesson.
Oh, yes, of course.
That moment, the sound design of the car and the interplay between her performance and the car, luckily, visually, I'm not sure who introduced this idea of having this driving instructor sign on top of the car that was attached with springs. Every time we cut back to the car on an exterior, we had this squeaky thing going because it was always shaking. But the rhythm of that scene and her performance and actually the other actor who's in the scene, whose name I do not know, but he gave an amazing performance as well. It's just a really funny, dynamic scene. And my sound effects editor, Dan Sexton, he cut the car through that whole sequence, and it just made me laugh every time I watched it. And it was built that way. I mean, it was designed to be funny. And so in that, there's lots of score in there, and we got to play a lot with the emphasis of the car, the passes, the interior, and then, her cutting the brakes and spinning out and the tire squeals and it finally comes to a skidding stop in front of Willow Hill, and it's like we did the tire chirping. I love that scene. So that was a moment I feel like where the sound effects really played a role in making it funnier. Yeah.
They did, and you're right. The tire squeal at the very end when they pull up to Willow Hill is a very funny moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's a pause there where they just look at each other, and it's perfect. It's great.
Yeah, and a lot of that is picture editing too, right? Everybody's trying to complement each other. But yeah, that was the direction, the picture editing, the music, the sound effects, and that whole moment. I love that scene.
I look forward to our next lesson.
Attention sound designers. The community-run field recording Slack channel's Mechanical Malfunctions Crowdsource is open from now until July 17th. All you have to do is submit one original recording of some kind of mechanical malfunction to participate. Everyone who enters will automatically get a full sound library featuring everyone else's submissions. This is a great way to add a treasure trove of unique sounds to your sound arsenal. Plus, more additional prizes will be awarded, including a Radius Mini Alto windshield, a pair of LOM UC Pro microphones, plugins from Audio Kids, tons and tons of free sound libraries, and more prizes still to be announced. For full details on how to participate, go to the description for this episode in your podcast app and click the link. Let's start recording, everybody. Let's talk about birds for a second.
Okay.
In season 2, there's a mysterious character that can control crows.
Yes.
And there's some swarming moments where crows swarm.
Yeah.
I've had to do swarm scenes in my career before, and I found them extremely difficult.
Yeah.
It quickly just becomes a mess. But this scene was not a mess. Do you want to talk about how you tackled it?
Yeah, for sure. So in 201, the first episode, which is the first time we get a swarm, like One Eye's gang of ravens comes and attacks someone. In that moment, Tim had said he wanted it to be like oppressive and suffocating. The whole challenge of season 2 with the birds in general was that I needed this incredible variety of crows and ravens and wing flaps. And I sourced all the libraries I could. I tried to do some recording on my own, and man, that's hard capturing clean birds. First thing I did was I took actually Thomas Rex Beverly's. He's two really incredible. He has a lot of great libraries, but he has two really incredible libraries on birds and ravens or crows. I'm not sure which. Can't remember, but But anyways, I went through that. I cleaned up all those birds, removed all the air, and isolated all the caws, and then all the flaps and all the lands. And then I pulled that all into sound particles. And then I started to experiment with how to get these caws and flaps and lands to swarm around the room. And so that was a really effective way of creating that swarm effect, like individual wing session and then like a caw session. And I wanted to be able to separate those elements in the mix. So great about that program is you can say like, oh, I want 100 wings or I want 1,000 wings. 1,000 was too much. It really allowed me to sort of go in and out of, so I created beds of the birds, and then that gave us flexibility on the stage to make it as oppressive as we wanted it to be. And then I fought with the effects mixer because I always wanted more. But, they're trying to make the dialogue come through and make the score sing as well. So we went back and forth quite a bit. And actually then when Tim listened to it, he wanted us to add more. But so that was my approach there. And then, and of course, in addition to that, we're using, the flaps as objects and we're individually flying them around, especially for the close-ups or the specific ones that are flying by camera or overhead or in. We're making those all objects and spinning them around the room. But yeah, most of that work was done in sound particles in the beds.
And so the room that we're in right now for this interview is an Atmos room.
Yeah.
Are you doing a lot of that panning here?
Yes.
Okay, so you're delivering it.
So I'm delivering objects pre-panned. So that's the advantage of working in an Atmos room. I'm trying to do as much as I can to help them out to speed things up, whether it's pre-panning in Atmos or, just delivering stuff as close as leveled as I possibly can. Jamie and I work very closely together.
Jamie's the effects recording.
Yeah, Jamie Sulik, the effects mixer. He and I work very closely together. We developed a template over the course of season 1. I work in his template. I'm sometimes doing a little bit of pre-mixing here, sending stuff to Verb and whatever I can to get things, to give him as much time to get through his mix days, because, it's very challenging. When you're taking the approach of mixing a feature, it's always a balance. It's always a delicate balance of trying to speed up things as much as I can by also not tying their hands in some way.
So there's another scene involving birds. I think it's in episode 1 where I guess it's ravens.
Yes.
But it's also in, I don't know if dream is the right word, but like she's, it's not the real world kind of.
Yeah.
And so those birds sound quite different.
Yeah.
You've treated them differently. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. We're trying to get to a specific tone in that scene, and it's much scarier. Those birds were treated, some of them were slowed down and sped up, and some of them, we just put a lot of slap and verb on them. And there was a lot of design in there as well. And actually, a lot of the BGs in that scene played a huge role. Christy McIntyre, our BG editor, she did a great job of like setting the tone in those locations. And so, anyway, so the birds in there, you're right, they are affected. And we did, whether or not I'm, putting them in slapper or something and trying to create some unique sounds for them, because this was supposed to be a different place, a different world.
Throughout the course of this interview, you've mentioned a lot of the members of your team.
Yes.
Which is awesome, because I'm going to be honest, a lot of times I do interviews and people don't mention the rest of their team. So you clearly have a tight-knit group and an affection for them all. Do you want to just go through, maybe we haven't talked about the Foley team yet?
Yeah, no, sure. So Randy Wilson, who runs a company called Q5, he and I have been working together for probably 20 years. And I try and get him on all my shows if I can. And he runs a great crew of Stefan Fraticelli and Justin Helle, Jason Charbonneau, who's the lead Foley artist on the show. for me as a supervisor, having cut Foley, having listened to a lot of Foley, I get a really good appreciation of what great Foley sounds like. And so their tracks are impeccable. And also, I can call them up and they'll send me whatever I need whenever I need it, kind of thing. And if I need stuff before the mix, so it's very collaborative, and their tracks are just amazing. As you probably know, I mean, they won, I think, an Emmy last year and 2 Emmys the year before that. And yeah, everybody knows about them. I probably shouldn't talk about them too much. I don't want them to get too busy. They say no to me.
And who else on your crew have we maybe not mentioned?
So on the sound effects side, it's myself, Dan Sexton, and Christy McIntyre. And then my incredible assistant, Sue Fawcett, for season 2, and Faustine in season 1. And then on the dialogue side, Alistair Gray is our production dialogue editor. He's one of those guys where detail and accuracy is what he lives for. So that's what you want in a dialogue editor. So he goes in and meticulously cleans up the dialogue to a degree that is, well, you can hear it in the show. It sounds fantastic. In season 1, I supervised all the ADR, did all the sound design, and supervised the show. And Dan was my sound effects editor. Christy cut the backgrounds, and Alistair cut the production audio. I think I cut the ADR too. No, he and I sort of split cutting the ADR in season 1. In season 2, I brought on Matt Hussey, who is a very seasoned ADR supervisor here in Toronto, who I've also known for forever. We started as assistants together in the early 2000s. And so I brought him on to help me supervise the ADR. And then Scott Donald, who's a dialogue editor and ADR editor that I work with, he cut the ADR and the loop group in season 2. So it's a pretty big team. It's like 3 on the dialogue side, 3 on the effects side, and then our assistant. And then, we work out of C3 with Mike Baskerville, Jamie Sulik, and Arturo, our assistant. So Mike and I have been mixed together since the early 2000s. So we have a long-standing rapport, an understanding of what the expectation is. And so that's really helpful. And as far as communication is concerned, you're not spending time explaining things. I know what he's going to do. He knows what I'm going to do. And then Jamie, he's season 1 and season 2, and he and I have worked off and on together as well for a long time. It's a very experienced crew, and everyone does a great job. I can't say enough about them. They're great.
Well, you mentioned the dialogue team.
Yeah.
There's a character, Orloff, I believe his name is.
Yes.
That is a bodiless head in a little tank of water.
Yeah.
Physically, that it doesn't make sense that a voice box would work underwater behind glass.
Yeah.
But the way you have all approached that, it works. It just makes sense when you watch it. Do you want to talk about the iterations you went through to make that?
Yeah, so that was a real design challenge. We talked a lot about it with Miles. Luckily, they put a small broken down speaker on the front. So that gave us like a pathway to break the rules of physics here. And dialogue clarity is something that Miles cares about quite a bit. So, the challenge is like, how do you put him underwater, the physics of his voice traveling through the water and then getting to this speaker while bubbles are coming out of his mouth and et cetera. So it was a real challenge. And we went through a bunch of iterations on the stage. And essentially we got to a place where we had several different versions that sort of became more and more murky. And we landed somewhere in between, where we felt like it was easy to understand, but also made sense that he was inside this glass jar filled with water going through a speaker. It was a process. And Mike Baskerville really was responsible for designing that in the end. Like he got it to the finish line.
So he's putting the schna on it, you mean?
Yeah. So,
but do you have to come up with more primitive versions of it to get approval, or how does that work?
No, so that we talked about it quite a bit, but we didn't present it to the showrunners until we did our first playback, and we were prepared. We had different options available, and we also that's the other thing so Mike and I worked on Into the Badlands together. We mixed a whole bunch of shows for Miles and Al back in 2015, 2016. And then I worked on Shannara Chronicles, which was their next show. But through that process of working on almost 50 hours of shows, we know what they want. We understand So, we're always trying to address notes before we get the note, right? So if we can address the note so they don't have to address it, that's the goal. So anyways, like Mike knows that Miles is going to lean on the side of clarity as opposed to like more affected and more underwatery. So we really focused on like the sound of the speaker and how it would sound as opposed to how much underwater element was going to be involved. Yeah. And so he was the one who really ended up creating a few presets. And he used Altiverb and like a convolution IR that was in Altiverb, and then maybe Footsbox and some EQ to get us there. Yeah.
You mentioned Into the Badlands.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big show. It was AMC, I think.
It's for AMC. Yeah.
You worked with those producers, and I'm assuming that's how you got on this show. They brought you on due to your past relationship.
Exactly.
This is a big show, though.
Yeah.
It's got famous actors.
Yeah.
It's a famous IP with a famous showrunner.
Yeah.
It's going to get eyeballs on it.
Yeah.
Did that intimidate you? Like, how do you, or did you just approach it, this saying, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Well, I mean, I guess I would probably say that no one really understood what the show was going to be until after it came out. But obviously when you're working with Tim, and even with Miles and Al, who I greatly appreciate, there's a certain amount of pressure on a show of this scale and size when you realize who's in the cast, what's involved, and when you start seeing the cuts come in and you're like, oh, like this is a huge show. Yeah, so it's, so on one side it's intimidating, but really, ultimately, when you become a sound designer and you want to work on big projects, this is it. Like you're like, I'm there. This is a fantastic opportunity to collaborate artistically with a filmmaker that you've admired, work on great material. Yeah.
It's also really cool. I don't know if you've had this in your career. I'm assuming every sound person has. You work your ass off on these shows and then they don't necessarily hit.
Right. Yeah.
So then when you work on a show that hits, that everyone has seen,
yeah,
you're suddenly, I don't know if the belle of the ball is the right word, but every party you go to, like just in your personal life.
Right, yeah.
Well, what are you working on? I'm working on Wednesday. What?
Yeah, everybody knows the show, which is, it's nice. I mean, even in, my neighbors here and where I live, like everybody knows the show and that's rare, It's like, I'm working on Into the Badlands. What's that show? It's on AMC. Okay. Nobody really knows it unless you're like into that genre of TV shows. You're not watching it, but Wednesday, everybody knows. So that wasn't so clear in season 1, but obviously once we got the streaming numbers, it was like, whoa, a billion views. Like, okay, that's a little pressure for season 2, right? You're like, okay, the bar is sort of internally risen here. Like 1 billion people are going to watch this. Maybe I should work late tonight,
The great thing about Wednesday is that it's based on a show from decades ago.
Yes.
Which then got a movie version a couple decades ago.
Yeah.
Which now is this whole new thing. So you're building on a legacy of a legacy of a legacy kind of thing.
Yeah.
Are there any Easter eggs or things of the previous projects that you brought in?
Yeah. So when I find out about a show that I'm about to work on, and you find out if it's based on a original IP or something like that, then I'm researching that IP to figure out what it's about, at its core, and then also like trying to watch the material that had already been created related to it. But Wednesday is unique in the sense that all the lore that's being built is being designed by Miles and Al. So they're creating this world as a new world. So that was exciting, because it's obviously completely different than all the previous material that was created on this IP. So there's that part of it. And then in season 2, there was an Easter egg where there was this parrot in, I think it's episode 204. This parrot speaks and Fester's interrogating the parrot. And we were casting for the parrot's voice. And, we were sending all that stuff to Tim to get approval on the character's voice. And then Tim was sending back these voice notes of like, no, I want this, the parrot to sound like this. And eventually we arrived at, well, why don't you why don't you do the voice of the parrot? And he agreed. And then, Tim is the voice of the parrot. And that was a pretty cool moment. We brought him in for ADR and we got to shoot him. And yeah, that's fun. It's in the show.
So you got to voice direct Tim Burton?
I mean, I did not voice direct Tim Burton. I shot Tim Burton's ADR. No, I didn't ask him for any extra takes.
So the foul-mouthed parrot is Tim Burton. That's awesome. That's fantastic. Right, yeah. John, thank you very much for inviting me in today. It was great to see where you work. And I'm wondering do you remember the first time that we met?
I do remember the first time we met because I borrowed your hydrophone.
Correct,
for a shoot that I was doing in Algonquin Park for a project I'm not allowed to talk about. But yeah, we met at a studio downtown, and you very kindly let me borrow your hydrophone, and I went up north for a few days and moved around some ice and tried to capture it with that. And yeah.
Were you in the freezing cold water, like slapping ice together and such like that?
I was not, okay. But Steve Monroe, who has scuba gear, was. So I asked if he would come along and help me, and he kindly agreed. And then he put on his wetsuit and got in the lake.
A frozen lake.
And we smashed some, the ice with some sledgehammers and got some pretty big chunks. And then we'd bang those around for a few hours until he got too cold. But yeah, that was the first time we met. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first time we met. And it's great that we got to talk today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Big thanks to John Loranger for inviting me over to his studio and having this fun talk with me. Once again, listeners in Toronto, come out on July 6th to see Independence Day and hear me interview the sound team afterwards. Check the description for this episode in your podcast app for a link on how to claim your free tickets. I have some amazing episodes coming up in the next few weeks, so make sure you keep an ear on the Tonebenders feed. We'll talk to you next week, everybody. Bye for now. Sound Ideas works with partners across the creative industries to distribute professional sound libraries, and they're always looking to grow their collection. If you've created your own sound effects library or are currently developing one, Sound Ideas is interested in acquiring high-quality collections from creators, whether it's a focus collection or a wide-ranging release. They offer a trusted platform with global distribution, professional licensing, metadata support, and a team that understands the craft. If you have a sound effects library and are interested in selling it, Sound Ideas would like to hear from you. To get more information, please reach out via email to support@sound-ideas.com. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.